Lesson 12, the immediate pane. The immediate pane is another debugging tool that we have in VBA. It's great for querying the current state of anything, or even for running just a single line of code in the immediate pane. Control G is the shortcut key that we're going to use to open the immediate pane. We'll walk through an example here. Let's get started. Okay, so in lesson 11, we wrote a little macro that would add a summary table to the end of this worksheet. See, it adds central, east, and west, and formulas here to figure out the totals for central, east, and west. And let's say that we added this in and we started sending this report out, and after a few days, we get word from the VP of sales. He says, hey, that table you added at the bottom of that report is a great table. In fact, I actually don't need the invoice detail. If you could just send me a worksheet that has those numbers, central, east, and west, basically that 6-cell range each day, that would be a beautiful thing. And so we say, okay, well, I wonder if we can change our macro so that way it can add those numbers in. Let's go take a look at the code. We'll go into Visual Basic. And you'll see that at the end of the code, we had gone back to cell A1. We don't actually want to do that. I'm going to take that line of code out. And this time, rather than remove the line of code, I'm just going to put an apostrophe for it. That basically is a comment. And I remember that we had a line of code here that I actually deleted. That line of code said, hey, we're going to select those 3 cells. Now I'd have to go back and review the video to figure out what it was, or record the macro again, but I bet we can do selection dot resize 3 rows 2 columns dot select. All right, so I'm going to run this to see how it looks. This is one of those things where I really regret getting rid of the line of code that the macro recorder put in there, because that line was actually useful at this point. Now, a week later, you'll see that we actually have this table selected. And basically, what I need to do now is I need to copy that and paste as values to a new worksheet. All right. In the old days, back in the 90s, there was a great tool that said, hey, start recording from the cursor. And for some reason, Microsoft got rid of that tool. It would be a great tool at this point because we have the first half of the macro that's working beautifully, but I need the second half of the macro to work. But what we have to do now is we're actually going to record a new macro, and that macro is going to come down here at the bottom. But we're going to take the lines of code from that new macro and paste them in here at the end of the first macro. So let's go back. We'll plan this out. I think what I need to do is the old macro is going to leave us selected, those 6 cells. I want to copy those cells and then use paste values. I'm then going to insert a new worksheet using the new worksheet icon. I'll switch back to sheet 1, do a copy of the 6 cells, switch back to the new worksheet, paste those 6 cells, and then use the move or copy command to move that to a brand new worksheet. That's my plan for the macro. We'll see how well it works. So I use record macro. I'll call it move summary table. I won't assign it to a shortcut key because I'm actually going to take the lines of code from this recorded macro and use them in the first macro. So we click OK. Again, the first thing we want to do is use the copy command and then paste values. That'll convert those formulas to values. I'm going to use the new worksheet icon and then switch back to the first worksheet, use Control C to copy, switch back to the second worksheet, Control V to paste, and then finally I want to move this worksheet to a new workbook. So I'll right click, choose Move or Copy, create a copy, and say that I want it to go to a new workbook. Click OK. All right, so we're done recording that bit of the macro. Let's click Stop, and we'll go look at the result. And you can see, sure enough, here we basically pick up with lines of code that will eventually go down here below our table. So what do? I take all of this recorded code. I'm going to copy that code. Actually, I can cut the code, Control X to cut. and then paste here below the last line of the first macro. And I might even add a comment for myself. A comment, remember, again, starts with an apostrophe. I'll say this is the second recorded macro. It should copy the table, paste as values, add a worksheet, copy the table there, and then move the new worksheet to a new workbook. Okay, so good to go. Let's give it a try. We'll come back to our original table here. I'll get rid of the table that was added. We'll go back to cell A1, and I'm ready to start running this code. Now, if we just felt really confident, we could just run the whole thing. The first time through, though, I rarely feel that confident. I always want to run through line at a time. So we'll press the F8 key, and I can actually just hit F8 a few times because I know that all of that stuff worked. And at this point, I'll switch back to Excel, and I'll see that my table's down there. It's selected. I do the copy. I do the paste values. All right, and we're good. Now, sheets.add. So we run that line of code, and let's take a look. You see that we have sheet 1 and sheet 2. If we go to sheets.add, I now have something called sheet 3, and I'm starting to realize I get this sinking feeling that things are not going to go well. We go back to sheet 1, application.copy mode, do the copy. We should see the marching ants. That's great. We do. And then it selects sheets, sheet 2.select. Well, that's a bad thing, as we can see, because we don't necessarily want to go to sheet 2. We wanted to go to the new sheet that we added. So we're going to have to start to get in and start to make some changes to this code, because we have a situation where as soon as we did the sheets.add, right back here, if we run that line of code, it added a new sheet to the end. So although the first time it was called sheet 2, it might be called sheet 3, sheet 4, and so on. Now, if you don't want to switch back to Excel, I want to introduce a new concept here called the immediate pane. The immediate pane. We can go up to View and choose Immediate Window, or Control G. Either one will work. I always use Control G. And basically, it starts out as a tiny little bit of code down at the bottom, and we can type commands into this window and they'll be executed immediately. And the command that I used most often is something called debug.print, and I can ask for certain things. So ActiveSheet.name. We just added a new worksheet. I want to see what worksheet we added. Oh, it's something called sheet 4. So I realize I'm in trouble because later on in the code we're going to refer specifically to sheet 2, and that's a bad thing because we just added a brand new sheet called sheet 4. So by using debug.print, now it turns out that the debug dot is not necessary. You can actually just come here and click print ActiveSheet.name and see that we're now on sheet 4, and we start to realize that our macro is in trouble because we're going to have a different name every time that we add a new worksheet. Sometimes it might be called sheet 2, but if we run the macro a second time in the same day, well, it's going to be called sheet 3 or sheet 4, and so we can start to discover that there's problems. It's also possible, by the way, and this is far less frequent that I'll do this, to actually run a line of code here from the immediate window. So I'm here in a blank cell. I could say active cell dot value is equal to 17, and that will actually type the number 17 in the active cell. So again, I mean, really, if you wanted to do that, you would switch back to Excel, but this is a situation where sometimes it's easier just to type a quick command into the immediate window. One great example for that is if we wanted to close personal.xls. You generally can't close personal.xls without going and closing Excel, but if I choose personal.xls, I could actually run a line of code here that said workbooks personal.xlsb.close, and effectively close that workbook, which is hidden, and really there'd be no way to do that in the Excel user interface. So the immediate window, again, that's press Control G. You can just basically query the current state of anything by using the immediate window. A great debugging tool. Control G, one of the tools in your arsenal that you'll use frequently. Now, as far as fixing this macro, we'll be able to do that once we learn about variables. That'll be in the next part of the live lessons.
Looking to advance your career by acquiring new skills? Tired of expensive off-site training programs? Wish you could learn from the best instructors in the industry? Look no further than live lessons. Self-paced, personal video instruction by the world's leading technology publishers. Each live lesson comes with a DVD featuring 3 to 4 hours of instructor-led classroom training, sample program code that allows you to work along with your personal instructor, and an example-rich study guide. Live lessons allow you to watch the entire course from start to finish, or navigate directly to any of the individual lessons. You'll literally watch over the shoulder of your instructor as he shows you how to build state-of-the-art applications. Live lessons, the power of the world's leading technology experts at your fingertips. To learn more, visit mylivelessons.com today.